with Professor van Asse's announcement that Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University is going to launch, I think it's called a Fish Force Capacity Building Program, particularly aimed at fisheries control officers and prosecutors to improve law enforcement in the fisheries crime arena.
Do you think that there's going to be interference, continued interference from people who are being bought by the market? Would you want to not speak?
There will be, but we have seen in various areas of environmental law, not only fisheries law, and I'm thinking of, for example, the Centre for Environmental Rights, having great successes in prosecuting, getting the state or themselves getting involved in legal cases to ensure legal compliance. So there are NGOs that I think are going to play a bigger role in the fisheries area to get compliance done. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Are you going to take a role in any of that?
Well, I hope to. I have many commitments, but I hope to kind of sow the seeds with students and pass them on. Some of my students are working in the area and so on, so I see my role as a kind of throw the pebble in the pond, what happens, ripples start.
Do you have any comment you want to make to the ordinary public out there who don't know much about how serious the situation is, as to what they could do?
I think to the ordinary public, the man and woman in the street, boy or girl, I think the important point was made by one of my colleagues from the United States who said, don't be shy, ask a question, follow up. If you see something that seems a fish that you're eating in a restaurant, doesn't seem to be a legal fish, ask questions. Start making a couple of waves and persist. That's what I have to say to every person in the street.
There was a canned lion hunting march on Saturday.
Canned lion?
Canned lion. So it's a group of people. They basically got together. They got tired of the amount of lions that were bred purely for the hunt.
Okay.
And so it's called canned lion hunting.
All right.
And it's
That's just for us that don't know these.
Yeah, that's fine. The hunters claim that canned lion hunting is good for conservation. So they say that it somehow stimulates the industry, and we need to have canned lion hunting. So that's from the hunting point of view. They say that the money raised from tourists coming into this country and people spending large money in this country, it goes towards breeding lions. But in reality, the only lions that it's breeding are lions that are going to be shot. So they're not actually lions that are having any direct benefit on conservation. So a group called the cannedlion.org put a march together. Actually, of interest, they put it together with a whole lot of international groups. There was a whole lot of international players that came to that march, because canned lion hunting is not endemic to South Africa.
Okay.
Canned lion hunting happens in the United States, it happens in Australia, it happens all over the world. In Israel, canned lion hunting happens. And these are people that are taking lions out of their natural habitat, putting them in tiny little cages until they're old enough, and they've got a clever mechanism of what they like to do. So if you ever go to a place where you can pet a lion, so and there's a couple of places like here in Hermanus, but all over the world, if you can go to a place where you can pet a lion and the lion doesn't try and attack you, what that is they're actually a breeding program for canned lion hunting. So they go through all these petting parks, then they get put in this tiny cage and they basically get sold to whoever can afford to shoot them. The guy doesn't even give the lion the decency to run around in the wild, in the veld. They basically shoot it right there and then in a tiny little enclosure so the lion can't run too far.
Jason, this is exactly the reason why ENN needs to broadcast.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of people like myself that didn't know about these things. So we need to make people aware of these things.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've got a lot of other stories about the fish dying off in the ocean, animals dying, the whole ecosystem. These are the kind of things I think that ENN would probably have to propagate so that people out there know and take action.
Africa is the worst hit, besides the small island states, when it comes to global warming issues. The impacts are already manifest on the continent, so we are not speaking of what may happen in 5 years or 10 years. We're talking about what is going on right now. We're speaking about droughts and famines on the continent, thousands of people displaced from their ancestral homes, living in refugee camps. We're talking about environmental refugees, climate environmental refugees already on the continent. We're talking about floods. We're talking about crop failures, desertification, mudslides. Floods not just in Africa, floods in places like Pakistan, where huge tracts of land have been submerged. To mudslides in Latin America, bushfires in Russia. In other words, climate change is a planetary crisis. It's not just a challenge that confronts a few vulnerable people in poor countries. It is a challenge to the whole planet and to every single person. Yesterday at the Faith Rally, Bishop Tutu declared very clearly that those who think that the crisis will exempt them, they actually live in fool's paradise. We may go first in Africa, but everybody's going to join everyone else. That was the message, and it was very clear. This is why we're so shocked that rich industrialized countries, led by the United States of America, would, even before coming to the COP, send a signal that nothing is going to come out of the COP, that they would not make verifiable, legally binding commitment to reduce emissions at source. And we're so disappointed.
Have to deal with. GDP does not measure the depletion of natural resources. It does not measure the production of pollution. The economists refer to negative externalities. This is the kind of phrase that induces sleep, but it actually hides a very important reality. GDP also does not measure positive externalities, and partly as a result, we have chronic underinvestment in education and healthcare and community services and family services, and it does not measure the distribution of net worth and income. And again, that is part of the reason we have a crisis of inequality growing in the world, in the United States, in China, in the European Union, in Peru, in almost every country in the world. So we need a better, more accurate way of measuring whether we are going in the right direction or in the wrong direction. Here in Lima, we are at a fork in the road. One way leads in the wrong direction, the other leads in the right direction, toward Paris, and then from Paris toward a sustainable future. It is important that we are joined not only by representatives of governments, but also representatives of NGOs, and critically, by representatives of private companies and public sector companies, many of whom are now leading the way and producing an important source of optimism as they invest in renewable energy, solar energy, wind energy, energy efficiency, sustainable forestry, sustainable agriculture. These new patterns of economic gain will mark the road toward the future. Already, if you look at the 100 largest companies in the world, 60 of them have set clean energy targets. This is especially important because we face another fork in the road. We must turn away from continued obsession with carbon-based energy and turn toward the energy sources of the future. And we must incorporate sustainability principles into business plans as well as into government policies. I know that there are other speakers, and I will keep my remarks brief. I will have the privilege of making some longer remarks here during these sessions, but before I close, I would like to refer to three poets. One who wrote in the Chinese language, one who wrote in the Spanish language, and
The story that I wanted to bring to your attention today, I've actually got a couple of stories, but there's one that's of particular interest to me because I see it as a massive, massive problem worldwide. And it's the Fukushima reactor. So the Fukushima reactor became a problem in February 2011. Japan experienced some giant-ass earthquake, and the Fukushima reactor basically went down with it. The Japanese, being incredibly inventive, have tried many different methods to basically isolate the cores, which are still radioactive. They're still burning hot, and they're basically releasing cesium-137 by volumes that, in fact, just recently it was compared to Chernobyl. They reckon it's up to 100,000 times the volume of cesium-137, which is radioactive, into the oceans. In 2011, the reactor blew its lid, and it started pushing out radioactive materials into the ocean. Scientists at that time assured us that the ocean would have some ability to absorb it and mix it with the Earth's kind of natural radioactiveness that's happening in the water. Then in November 2012, the first reports came in from California that they were seeing defects and birth defects happening in seahorses. And a lot of people ran this back and they said, hey, listen man, this might have something to do with the Fukushima. But everyone shot them down as conspiracy theorists, like just people that just blew stories out of proportion. Then in 2013, the first stories started coming out about random die-offs of American bald eagles and quite a number of large winged bird species. So they've started seeing these. They started seeing these huge wash-ups of bird species on the sea, and bald, which is an inland bird, they started seeing them being washed up as well. And more and more people started to talk about this. They even